Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mormon Stories Podcast. And it's not just another edition of Mormon Stories Podcast. This is the 1000th episode of Mormon Stories Podcast. Yay! We are broadcasting to you live today in Redlands, California, at the dance studio, home of the Schwimmer family, and they are dancing legends, not just dance instructor legends, and dancing legends, not just in California, but across the world. And we are here to re-interview Benji Schwimmer, who hopefully many of you know who that is. But for those who don't, Benji is... He is the 13-time world swing dance champion. He's a choreographer, and he won season 2 of So You Think You Can Dance. And we interviewed him 7 years ago on Mormon Stories Podcast. Probably the first kind of celebrity that I ever interviewed. I remember being super excited about getting Benji to do the interview. And my family were huge fans of So You Think You Can Dance, and so we were excited about that. And but a lot has happened since then. So we are here to talk about kind of what the impact of the Mormon Stories interview was on his life, what his life has been like since, his career, his faith. He did lose his faith in Mormonism and leave the church. We're going to talk about that. And we're going to talk about what it's like to be a gay post-Mormon man, or at least from his perspective, 7 years on. A lot of fun things to talk about. We are also going to include we have many of your questions already from those of you who have submitted your questions. We'll be sharing your questions and comments. We also want to encourage our live listeners to share their comments and questions as well.
Yeah.
We would love to incorporate that. And I just want to personally thank Bill and Lynn Moore, because this 1000th episode of Mormon Stories Podcast is being brought to you today by Lynn and Bill Moore. And Bill's here running the audio and video, and Bill and Lynn were generous enough to sponsor the airfare and the hotel and some of the food. They're just super generous supporters of Mormon Stories Podcast. So a huge shout out to the Moore family in Houston, Texas, in Sugar Land, Texas, actually. Dear friends, not only of the DeLynns, but also of Sam Young.
Yeah.
And so anyway, we're super excited. So without any further ado, Benji Schwimmer, welcome back to Mormon Stories Podcast.
Thank you so much, John. It is an honor to be here. I feel like we're having almost a bit of a Groundhog Day kind of experience, but it's wonderful to be here on your 1000th episode, and congratulations to you, because I think that is so fantastic, and the work that you do is life-changing, life-affirming, and it saves a lot of people. So I'm honored to be here and happy to be a part of this again.
Okay, well, it's our honor as well. So I thought it'd be cool to begin by giving those who didn't have a chance to watch the original interview, we want to let them know, please go back and watch that. It's epic. It's amazing. It's definitely one of the top 10 episodes of all time out of 1,000. Check it out. But for those who we just want to give the Reader's Digest version, give us the 7-minute version of what they would have heard in that interview.
A lot of crying, a lot of manic behavior. So I had talked to John prior to that, and I was going through a big-time faith crisis, and I actually used that Mormon Stories to publicly come out. I had not come out publicly to anybody other than immediate family and a few close friends, and it was the easiest way for me as a public figure in the Mormon church, after being on So You Think You Can Dance, to say my piece without having to address people one-on-one. But yeah, I was raised in the church to two parents. One was not a member, the other one was.
What were their names?
My mom, Lori, and my father, Buddy. My dad, Buddy Schwimmer, yes. Buddy and Lori Schwimmer. They're world-renowned dancers. They've traveled the world. They used to kind of take me along as well, along with my younger sister, Lacey, and my older cousin, Heidi. We were kind of a 5-person family unit. We traveled the world child, and I learned how to dance and teach dance at a very early age. My parents and I, we grew up not really wealthy. At the time, dance was not as much of a popular mainstream thing as it is today. And so we worked very hard to have what we had, a lot of second-hand store clothes and a lot of this, that, and the other, but we did something that we loved. And so I was always surrounded by creative experiences. I was always surrounded by the need to work hard because we had to, and was raised in the church since forever, since I was a fetus, I guess, and true believing member of the church. I have extended family on my mother's side that are very active temple workers, and so there's that experience. But on the flip side, the other half of my family were non-practicing Jews, so there's that as well. But lo and behold, as I was 9 or 10, I forget the age that I was, but my father did get baptized and converted to the church later on after I'd already been baptized. And so it was a very interesting upbringing in terms of I had a lot of true blue believing, faith affirming members of my family, and also ones that weren't. And for me, I was a true believing member of the church. At a young age, I knew that I was gay. I was attracted to men, and it was a trial and a temptation that I was dealing with. I was a full-on believer in the sense that I believed in the premortal existence, that I chose this challenge and this temptation and this trial, and that I had the strength and the abilities to overcome it with the atonement of Christ. And I went through change therapy for about 12 years. I served a successful mission, which to this day is one of the greatest experiences of my entire life. And came back 2 months later, auditioned for So You Think You Can Dance, and was casted on it. Dealing with that, I had been engaged to 2 different women. One, I was Dear John on my mission. Hi. And the other I dated after I was on So You Think You Can Dance. And after a couple of tragedies, and I had come out to her, she was the first person I ever told about my temptations. Interestingly enough, we went to therapy together. It was a good experience. I thought that this was the person for me. And because of a personal tragedy in her life, she told me at one point that she couldn't deal with it. On the Kinsey scale, I'm not a direct 6, meaning my sexuality is a little bit more fluid. And I believe most people's sexuality is relatively fluid anyways. But I was attracted to men and women. And she felt like because of my traveling and with what I do for a living, that there would just be double the temptation, and she couldn't handle it. So it broke my heart, and it kind of broke my spirit a little bit. So I went through different options with change therapy and groups and this, that, and the other. And I ended up falling in love with a man through a relatively serendipitous, kismet, if you want to call it miraculous experience. And we fell hard. We were a couple, but we never did anything sexual. It was a kissing only kind of relationship. We slept in the same bed and cuddled and this, that, and the other, but we went to church together. We read our scriptures together. We said our prayers together. It was a very interesting experience, and shout out to John. He knows about this, and I told him I can say his name, which is interesting. So not John DeLynn, but a different John.
Hi, John. It's great to have you joining us today.
Yeah. Hi, Johnny. It was a very beautiful and confusing experience. And John wanted to leave. He wanted more. He wanted us to have a deeper kind of relationship in terms of our intimacy. And it was something that I felt like I was spiritually damning him, that I was the one tempting him or causing him to lose his faith. And I felt really guilty about it. And subsequently, I had to end things with him. And it crushed me as much as it probably crushed him. And so I went through an experience where I asked my spiritual leaders, my bishop, and my stake president to go through a disciplinary council, even though there were no lines that were so crossed where I really merited it. I just wanted kind of a fresh start. And so I went in front of the tribunal at a stake level and asked to be disfellowshipped so that I can kind of have my own prodigal journey and start back. And subsequently during that time, there was the asterisk program that was implemented. So a couple of weeks before I was about to go back to the temple for the first time, my stake president nervously, who's also a psychiatrist, his hands were shaking and he said, Benji, and his countenance changed in this interview. He's like, I had to call you in there because I had to let you know that because you're admittedly a homosexual, we have to put an asterisk at your church membership records. And so because of that church membership record issue, we we just need to put this asterisk there. It's not that big of a deal. You can still get, sealed in the temple. You can still do everything that you can, other than the fact that you can't serve in the church with youth under the age of 18 without supervision.
Which implies what?
Which implies that they think that I'm one step away from being a pedophile. And that really hurt, because one of the biggest things that I looked forward to after making a decision to just lead a celibate lifestyle as a gay man in the church was being able to serve the youth in the church, and being able, as an honest and worthy, parenthetically worthy member of the church, that I should have the same rights and privileges as everyone else. And I didn't. I was a marked man. And I felt like that was counterintuitive to what the atonement is. I felt like whatever the church legal side was, it was not reflected in Christ. And I didn't believe and feel that that was right. And that was the very first moment that my faith, my worldview of the church changed. It was cracked. It was fragmented. And because of that, I went through this crazy spiral of fasting and praying and seeing things from a different perspective, taking myself away for a moment and realizing, is this true, is this not? And I had a really cool, you'd have to watch it on Mormon Stories, on the old podcast, the episode, on YouTube as well. But I had an experience that was just a very strong confirmation that it was time for me to leave. And I thought it was just going to be for a spell, that I needed to leave in order to gain experience. I felt like the atonement was with me and that I needed to leave. I felt like the church wasn't ready to house members of the church that were in my situation, the fringe members of society, if you will, of the church. And I had a very strong confirmation that it was okay to escape and leave. And because of that, I left the church. But I did so fully recognizing that I was going to come back. And in fact, this is an interesting fact that I don't think we talked about, John, but I actually saved my tithing in a savings account, fully expecting to come back and pay it all. And, but as I left the church and as I experimented with life, with love, my worldview of the church totally changed. And I lost my faith. And I hate saying lost my faith. I would rather say I gained a pure sense of what my faith is and what my beliefs are, as opposed to having been conditioned since I was a baby to believe and see the world with a certain lens. And that was kind of, I think, where you and I reached out. I was at a fairly high risk of depression at the time and anxiety, and I had dreams of taking my own life very frequently, and they were good dreams. They weren't nightmares. And so I thought that was also me reaching kind of a boiling point and listening to that still small voice, whether that's my conscious or something else, I know not. I don't care to know what it is. I just knew that it was right for me to leave. And then I did Mormon Stories, and I came out, and it was a crazy whirlwind. And I don't know if you know this, John, but Perez Hilton is a big famous media gay pop culture guy, right? Biggest pop culture website in the world. And he caught wind of my interview. He posted it on his website because of the fact that he has a thing for dancers and he always knew that I was gay or this, that, and the other. But it was during National Coming Out Month. So it was in the summer of 2011 that came out. And so it became a lot bigger than I had expected or anticipated. I thought maybe a few hundred people were going to listen to this podcast, and I could send it to my Mormon friends and family and former converts of the church, just so that they can get a taste of what I went through, that it wasn't an easy decision for me to leave, that I went through hell and back, and here we are.
All right.
Yeah.
That was amazing.
And I say these things and they just, yeah.
Yeah. And please go back and listen to the full episode, because it's gripping and it's emotional, a lot of details, and it's really powerful and important. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's actually jump in. So what was so you did an interview on Mormon Stories Podcast in 2011.
I did.
It's even back then, I would even think now, but especially back then, I would think, given that your world, you were on primetime television world, you were on the global stage.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, well, Mormon Stories is small peanuts, small potatoes. It's not going to really, penetrate your actual life. You'll do the interview, but you probably won't hear much about it. It probably won't have much of an influence. For you, it'll be this blip, but for me and for my audience, it'll be super cool.
Yeah.
That would have been my prediction of what it would have been like. So
yeah.
What was the aftermath for you, or was there an aftermath?
There was there still is an aftermath. It's interesting, John, because to me, this was my coming out letter. This was my way to publicly just show the earnestness of what I felt and how difficult it was to leave the church, both to honor my Mormon past and to just express my love for the people that were there for me, that have supported me, my friends, my family in particular, but even the fans from So You Think You Can Dance and around the world that were fans of my dancing or my choreography or this, that, and the other. I wanted them to know what I went through. I wanted them to know my struggles. And it was a very cathartic experience as well. Afterwards, though, I still to this day get messages from people, still seeing that online. A lot of the people don't even know it's Mormon Stories. People just find it on YouTube. If they're watching my dance videos, they end up seeing a link or a recommendation. So it's interesting because I feel I didn't realize this, but more people, because of the whole reality TV thing, they think that they know you, right? And they think that they can talk to you like that. And it actually just let people more in. So for a while, I actually kind of withdrew from the media altogether. I mean, it was almost overwhelming that people felt like they knew my life, and 500 people in a day would ask me these deep spiritual questions and almost seeking guidance from me. And the funny thing is maybe I didn't project it, but I was just putting my foot out the door. Like, my Mormon experience was just months after I came out to friends and family. So it wasn't like I had arrived or I had all these answers. And so people looked to me to give them answers and support, and I really didn't have any. I mean, I was figuring it out myself. And so
you come across as confident and well-spoken and intelligent. And so
none of those things are true.
No, you do. And so those of us who would have watched would just be like, oh, he's got it. He's liberated. He's free. You're out.
Yeah.
Smooth sailing.
Yeah, no, not even close, man. If anything, too, I think a lot of people just assume that. So even just interactions with friends and family that may have seen it, they did. They looked to me as some sort of person that trailblazed a path, and I don't view myself in that way at all. In fact, it was just a daily self-discovery of figuring stuff out, and it was tumultuous. But it's really interesting when I go to dance events, for example, and someone comes up to me afterwards, and I'm expecting them to ask me for a private lesson or a picture, this, that, and the other. And sometimes they just come up and hug me, and they say, I listen to your Mormon Stories podcast. I'll tell you this much, it's so much better to hear, like, I listen to your Mormon Stories podcast than I voted for you on So You Think You Can Dance. Like, it's actually, to me, I take more pride in what I did emotionally and spiritually as a person than what I've done on a TV show 12 years ago. So it's interesting that people to this day still talk to me about it. But it's been a great experience in that sense. And I don't have the answers, people. It's just, I'm still going through my own experience. I'm still growing, still evolving. But I have had a lot of growth, I think, since filming the show. So there's that.
Well, let's jump into that. So you do the interview and you get swamped with questions and stuff. What happened to your life? Let's just follow through on your story chronologically. So what happens after that?
What happens after that is I continue to dance. I was actually worried about coming out that people in the dance community wouldn't find me believable as the leading man. I'm still a competitive dancer, and in competition, I'm leading. I'm a man on the floor. I'm dancing with women predominantly. And I worried that, I remember thinking this while we interviewed it, I worried that one of my biggest fears outside of being rejected by friends and family in the Mormon community was people thinking that I was not going to be a strong and powerful dancer on the floor. And I know that sounds so probably silly to most people, but that's my life. As a dancer, I want people to believe that I'm strong, that I know what I'm doing. It's not just some gay thing, but it's who I am as a person. And the gay thing is just a sliver on the pie chart of who I am.
And by the way, you can be masculine and gay.
Well, yeah, of course. But I feel like the whole gay thing, people would not be believable. If I did a love story, for example, each year, we choose different pieces of choreography. I didn't want people doing the proverbial eye roll when I go out there and I embrace a woman. And I felt like it was very important for me to convey that, but I think I did it, I shouldn't have worried about it. One of the best reactions after coming out was just that people embraced me and respected my art even more. If I am gay, if I am straight, doesn't matter, but whatever role I'm playing on the floor, it actually, because they know who I am, And if I'm playing a role and if it can be believable, then I know I've done my job right. And yeah, the whole masculinity thing, I think, was one of the biggest issues. I watched it for the first time, the Mormon Stories interview that we did 7 years ago, a couple years back, and I was mortified after I watched it. I felt so bad. I was upset with myself in many ways. I mean, I deprecated all over watching it because of the fact that I felt like I was still very, very hung up on trying to prove that I was a man. And I did that because I was made fun of so much as a child for being a dancer that everyone called me fag. Everyone called me all these horrible, hateful names. And I would fight. Like, I would get into fistfights with people to just say, no, I'm not, right? That's the Irish in me, I guess. And so I realized that I still had a lot of heterosexism kind of floating in my brain, in my psyche. I feel as if, too, I was trying to prove that I was a man despite being gay. And I've gotten over that so much more now in these later years after having come out. But it was a process. And rewatching that, I realized, wow, I was still really compensating. So it's funny because most people say, wow, you came out, it was this beautiful thing, you were so vulnerable and raw. But I was still, I had a huge guard up in many facets of who I am as a person. And I think I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know if my masculinity was going to be challenged after leaving the church. And I got over it chronologically because I started dating. And in dating people, you start connecting with people, all sorts of different walks of life. I've had partners that were very effeminate. I've had partners that were very masculine. And it doesn't matter. I fell in love with both types, and it doesn't really matter to me, you know? Yeah. I don't know if you have a question.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, tell us again about what your main day jobs are. So 2 or 3 main day jobs, like what do you do professionally for those who don't kind of have an understanding?
Yeah, so it's very hard to understand because people see you dance on TV, they think that that's your job. Well, I do. I direct segments on live TV often. I'm a choreographer.
So some of the shows?
I've done So You Think You Can Dance, Dancing with the Stars, X Factor, World of Dance. I'm a choreographer on that show. I've done Everything America's Got Talent, and I not only direct, but I choreograph and perform. So I train, but on the side note, I'm a competitive dancer. So I wake up, I train every day. I'm in the gym for 2 hours. I do PT. I practice with my dance partner twice a day, in the morning and at night. I also coach and choreograph over 50 pieces a year, usually for other people, other companies. I lecture as well on musicality, music theory, performance aspect. I'm also kind of a secret weapon for Olympians. So like Adam Rippon's The Bird piece, that was very well known at the Olympics this past year. I choreographed that. So I'm an Olympic coach and figure skating choreographer as well. So
figure skating?
Yeah, I had 11 choreographed pieces in the Olympics this year from 5 different countries.
What?
Yeah.
This year?
Yeah, I'm kind of a badass, John. So so I do a little bit of everything. I just got done directing a Quentin Tarantino segment in his new film, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And so, you know, I do...
You're allowed to say that now?
I will, yeah. I just checked my contract. I'm good now, so we're okay. And if not, I don't think Quentin's going to be watching Mormon Stories. Not to like say that you're not super famous. You're the Oprah of Mormonism, brother. But
who else was on the set? Can you say? Or
yeah, Brad Pitt, Leonardo DiCaprio, Margot Robbie, Al Pacino. Al frickin' Pacino was there. Burt Reynolds before he passed. So this is just a couple months back.
That's amazing.
So I don't know if that kind of ties people in, but in terms of my training as a dancer, I am an athlete and an artist, and it's a very interesting dichotomy. And I train like an Olympian. I'm maybe even more so. So I take it as serious as a seizure with what I do, and I'm very focused on that. I'm very passionate about it in that sense, to a fault sometimes.
And that training is for what competitions?
For my world championships.
So talk about that.
So the World Swing Dance Championships happen the day after Thanksgiving every year. I've been competing at it as a child since I was 3. And
your parents are legacies?
My parents are legends in the dance community.
Not broadly, and also in swing.
Broadly,
right?
and in the swing dance community. My parents are world renowned in many communities, though. So I've trained in every dance style there is. So we pride ourselves here as like very versatile dancers. Like I would say I could walk into any room in any dance form and fix what's happening. And that's what
ballroom, swing, tango,
but not just partner dancing, contemporary, hip hop, tap, house dancing, voguing, everything, ballet.
Right.
We can do that. I actually just recently gave lectures on what we call modern swing, where it's an evolved version of swing, where we're doing it to contemporary music. And I'm working with contemporary companies, private companies, on how to partner better. I'm creating a system, a physics system, on how to dance and connect with another body more efficiently in any art form, in any genre of the world. And it's been really fun to kind of do that as I've been branching out a little bit. So yeah, I'm kind of a dance nerd when it comes to that.
And this competition happens once a year.
Once a year.
World champion.
The World Championships. And I train like a fiend for it, maniacally. So yeah.
And you will have won...
I've won 13 years in a row now.
In a row.
In our professional category. Yeah.
Yeah, and I want to talk about that, but we'll come back to that.
Okay.
So chronologically, you do your Mormon Stories interview.
Yeah.
You get a lot of press. Let's do two threads. Professionally, let's do three threads. Professionally, faith-wise, and romantically.
Okay.
Let's try and kind of follow those three threads chronologically.
Yeah.
For whatever points you think are relevant.
Great.
To kind of tell your story from there.
Okay. Yeah. Shortly after I met somebody and I started dating a new guy, and it was one of those things where this is really very fresh, and we dated and it was amazing. There was fireworks and it was this, that, and the other, and it was great. And he was in the Marines. He was closeted. We met from Grindr, which is like a very popular gay dating app.
Was it hard to date a gay man as a ex-Mormon, a newly minted ex-Mormon?
Yeah.
What's that like to...
Oh my gosh.
I mean, because there, for better, for worse, for true or false, there are, rumors or stereotypes about the gay experience.
Yeah.
And so I imagine, but that doesn't mean that you're not this innocent, naive, sort of like earnest, law of chastity kind of Mormon.
Wide-eyed person.
You were.
Yeah.
And so we might have thoughts, but even you were probably scared.
I was
or
scared
intimidated.
out of my mind.
Talk about that.
Because the problem is, and this is a whole nother can of worms, but in general, the gay community, when you think gay community, most people think pride festivals, drag queens, men in jock straps and big boots walking around with a lot of muscles, with bent wrists, and I think that that's unfortunately a very common stereotype that most people, when you think gay community, you think that. I think that's starting to change, right? And I'm so happy that it is. And that scared me. The AIDS epidemic, that scared me. There's a lot of drugs and experimentation at these dance clubs that you go to, and it scared me. I remember I walked into a gay club shortly after coming out, and I walked in and I had the worst anxiety attack. Here I am walking into a dance club where I should feel like at my most comfortable, right? And I walk in.
I own this place,
right? Like I can tear apart anybody here in this room, right? And immediately I'm seeing guys and their jaws are moving like this. They're beautiful and they're dancing, but they're on so many drugs.
What does the jaw mean?
Well, when a guy does this with his jaw, it's usually a sign that they're on like multiple types of narcotics. And so, I walked in there and someone tried kissing me and putting a drug in my mouth. And I'm like, what is this? This is not what I want. This is that large and spacious building. This is Sodom and Gomorrah, and it scared me. It scared me so much, John. It was crazy. And it's funny, after I did Mormon Stories, I immediately moved to San Diego. And I moved near the Gayborhood, which is Hillcrest. It's similar to West Hollywood. It's kind of I felt like I had to make a pilgrimage to like a gay Mecca, so to speak, because I thought that's what you do. I thought you come out, you move to a big city, and you start dating, and you find your community. And what I realized really quickly was, just because I'm gay doesn't mean that we all share a common link. I have a lot of friends that are like, oh, I have a gay friend, you're going to love him. Why? Because he's gay?
Yeah, there's no such thing as the gay experience. It doesn't exist.
Calm down.
There's no such thing as the gay lifestyle.
Right.
There is so many different moralities, approaches to life, tastes, preferences, right?
Yeah. Your straight lifestyle is very, very vast and crazy. There's no difference, I think, other than the fact that we're still a minority, we're still a marginalized society, relatively speaking. And because of that, we have tighter pockets and tighter knit communities. And other than that, though, it's that. So I dealt with that. And I also dealt with, in the dance community, the only gay men that I knew in the dance community, 2 of my first teachers died of AIDS. One was a BYU student, married with 3 kids. And so I had this vision of either, if you were more of the straighter acting gay, you're going to die of AIDS. And that's a trauma, right? That's obviously not the case. But, or you have these really flamboyant characters that are walking around like the Just Jack types, and they're entertaining the crowds and they're funny as all hell, but I feel like they're on. I feel like they're being a character. And, I think we all fall into those categories as times as people, but I just didn't relate with either one of those two groups, or at least I didn't. And now I've gotten to a place as I started dating. I fell in love with this guy, and it was very wonderful. It was very intense. And he loved the fact that I was Mormon because he loved the fact that I had discipline, that I wasn't one of those types to just party and to sleep around and to cheat. Like, I believed in monogamy, and I believed in so many of my Mormon practices other than the fact that it was with another man. And I think he really liked that. He was a Marine, so he had to be disciplined. He couldn't do drugs because they did drug testing and this, that, and the other. He was actually going into the police academy at the time when we were dating. And so I think we got each other in that sense. He had been to Afghanistan several times, so he liked the fact that I'd been to Oaxaca on my Mormon mission. And we could kind of find an interesting common space together. Ironically, he cheated on me, and that broke my heart. And I realized quickly thereafterwards that he was more ingrained in that gay community that I thought he was shunning, or that side of the gay world, than I had anticipated. And it broke my heart. And the funny thing was, John, and this is what I realized, and this is something that I think our viewers who are gay or who are struggling and maybe dating for the first time or thinking about getting into the dating community, one piece of advice that I can say is this: Jesus, or the role that the Savior plays in your life, in the Mormon world, the church experience, you need to mourn it when you leave. And I don't think I did. I think I did my Mormon Stories thing. And for the most part, the response was amazing. The response was so positive. We still love you. We still love you. I mean, I got a hate letter here and there every day, but I usually just tried to ignore it because I just didn't care. And if there were friends of mine that reacted negatively, I let them say their piece, but I didn't respond. And if they wanted to come back and apologize and be friends with me and accept me as I am, great. If not, it's time to move on. And I had to leave it at that. I'm not going to try and defend my position. I mean, I think my Mormon Stories experience was enough of a defense to begin with. And if they couldn't empathize or sympathize in that moment, then they needed some growth and needed some work. But going back to that, when I came out and when I broke up with him after he cheated on me, he needed to break up. He wasn't ready. I realized that I wasn't mourning this loss of him. It was a short-lived relationship, relatively speaking. What I did was I was mourning the loss of the church. This guy that I dated was a rebound to Mormonism.
Oh, wow.
And that's what I had figured out. I'm like, why is this soul crushing? Like, yeah, it hurt my heart but we were together for not even a year. And yet, what I realized is I was mourning the loss of the role of Heavenly Father in my life. I was mourning the loss of this, and he represented that. He represented this divine romance that we had because I felt like God put him in my life. I felt like I was being rewarded for listening to that still small voice and leaving the church. That was strong for me, John. And it was one of those things where I realized that this man was a rebound. That relationship was a Band-Aid of the hole that was left in my heart from leaving my faith that I've known my whole life for 27, 28 years. And so that was huge for me. That was a profound experience. And it took me, I needed time to not date. I actually had to stop dating guys for a while. I had to stop doing that. And I just needed to feel that void. And I needed to find ways to work around it. And that actually comes into play with one of those layers that you mentioned. So while the romantic side stopped for a minute, what did step up was my professional side. So I took all of that passion for Mormonism and I doubled down in dance. I doubled down in being able to be a better dancer, a better teacher. I traveled the world. I studied. I worked harder. I became a much better dancer well into my late 20s and early 30s than I ever was before, when I was a Mormon, when I was on So You Think You Can Dance. That to me was college. That was the experience for me. So when people talk about this as some sort of crowning achievement, to me it was like a graduation ceremony into actually my career. And that's why I just kind of laugh when people are like, oh my gosh, it was such a great experience. To me, it was college, you know, it was education.
Okay, I'm going to integrate a couple questions that listeners have asked.
Okay.
some have gotten the sense, and I'm guessing that you're going to have some sensitivity regarding what you're able to talk about and not, because professionally you don't want to speak out of class, whatever the term is. These are important people, Nigel, Mary, whoever, these producers and judges on So You Think You Can Dance and all that, and you still have a relationship with them.
Many of them, yeah.
So, some get the impression, or maybe I've had the impression, that there were some bumpy things about that.
Yeah.
And or that maybe you weren't always comfortable wanting to talk about that. Talk about any of that you're able to.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that's going to answer a lot of the listeners' questions, right? So, yeah, you know what it is for me, and one thing that I think you were very helpful with earlier on in this interview is you immediately were talking about, I'm a 13-time undefeated world champion. If when, knock on wood, I win my 14th world championship, I will break the world record, the Guinness Book World Records, for most world titles in any art form of dance, any form of dance at all. And I currently hold the record in swing dancing by many, and partner dancing in general. So, I've done a lot more things where through the work, through my control, through my training process, I actually felt like I won something. With So You Think You Can Dance, it's largely based on personality. It's largely based on TV and what the producers want to put in front of the audience's mind. And however much of a real experience it was for me on camera, what happened behind the scenes was pretty traumatic. People didn't treat us very well, in particular me. A lot of choreographers, a lot of producers tried breaking me for drama. And I felt a little bit like I was being a pawn. So, people see the smiling, they see that I won and this, that, and the other. But when I won, I felt guilty as all hell. Because here you had Danielle, Heidi, Travis, Allison, Natalie, Dimitri, Ivan, Martha, all these amazing dancers. And why me? Why did I win? And I felt super guilty about it. So for me, it was a very interesting experience because I cared about these dancers that I had great camaraderie with at the time. And I wanted them to be successful. I wanted them to get it. I just loved the experience ultimately, in terms of what I learned as a dancer and how I learned to be a better performer. But to me, again, that was just a TV show. It was a year of my life. Whereas what I do now, to me, is so much more profound, has so much more weight. And I know people can't get that because it's such a niche community that I'm in, and I'm not in the public spotlight as much as I was during that show. So people connect with me on that show, and they voted with me. But there's also this feeling that people, because I voted for you, you owe me a behind-the-scenes thing. And frankly, I don't owe you anything. I don't owe you jack shit. Grateful that you voted for me, like so grateful. But the work that I put on that show, the hours off camera that people didn't see, the crying at night, the sweating, the blood, the tears, the extra practice when people were asleep and I was still doing my thing, that's my gift to you as a dancer. So sometimes I feel like people feel like they can ask me all these behind the scenes questions, and they can ask as much as they want, but I feel like I need to have some boundaries as well. And also, it was kind of a traumatic experience for me, so I don't like rehashing it all the time. And I would rather ask people, what are you up to now, as opposed to, who's your favorite choreographer on the show? It was 12 years ago. Like, I don't even remember half the names of the people I worked with, So I feel like that has something to do with it. And also, too, I tried really hard to separate myself. Like, I took the title from the show and I wanted to move on. I didn't want my business, I didn't want my success to be so heavily related to that show, because I was already a 3-time world champion before I entered that show. I had already made a name for myself in a smaller sense, but in my own dance communities. And that's the community that I work from for the most part. And everything I've done since, like, the show has maybe opened a few doors. It's a good sweetener on a resume or this, that, and the other, but you still have to audition. You still have to do everything like any other dancer would have to do to earn what you get. And that's what I've done. And I just don't, again, it was college to me. It wasn't my pinnacle. And if people think it's a one-hit wonder kind of thing, I don't view it that way at all. It was a reality TV show ultimately, and reality is a very air-quoted thing. It was not scripted, but there was a lot of things behind the scene that were forced and contrived out of my control. Editing is everything, right? I don't know if that answers your question at all, or
Totally does. Okay. So
yeah.
so Yeah, I imagine it's like, yeah, like you said, a one-hit wonder where a star gets a song early on, but then goes on to have all sorts of personal and professional achievements. And everybody just wants them to sing that one song that they sang at the beginning of their career.
Right. And I think people can sympathize with that. They've seen movies like that where it's like, hey, do that thing, you know, whatever it might be. We've all seen TV shows and movies like that about people. So yeah, I mean, look, it'd be different if like I was Lou Vega and I sang Mambo No. 5 and I still get paid for it, but I don't. You know what I mean? Like that show didn't even really pay in that sense. So when you mention So You Think You Can Dance, I don't mind it. And when people mention it, it's fine. But again, it was 12 years ago and it's great. And if that's what you want to say, like I'm happy that my experience, my work touched you and maybe it influenced you and inspired you. I do love hearing people come up to me and saying, I started dancing because of you on So You Think You Can Dance. I feel like that to me is a huge honor and it's wonderful. But when you want to ask personal questions about other cast members or about Nigel or about Kat Deely or Mary Murphy, I just don't feel like it's my space to talk for them or to peek behind the curtain of a show. Like that's our professional side, and behind the scenes sometimes need to be behind the scenes.
I love it. Okay.
Boundaries, John.
I love it. Have to ask, but
of course,
I love the answer.
Ask anything, John. It's fine. Ask anything, Facebook communities. It's fine.
Yeah. Okay. So, so you had that breakup.
Oh yeah.
And then, so what big things happened in your career after that?
I mean, you know, everything. The thing is with my career is I've continued to compete. So that was always a constant thing. I'm at conventions almost every weekend, adjudicating, lecturing, coaching, choreographing, competing, improvising, doing shows. So that's happened. I've traveled to literally almost every country in the world to perform, to direct shows on TV. I've done a lot of really fun things. I've choreographed for a lot of famous people and a lot of TV shows. I've worked for HBO, VH1, MTV. I've directed live segments for Divas Live. I've done a lot. I've starred in music videos. I've directed music videos.
Any ones we'd know?
One of the videos that I did that I probably was most known for was Candyman by Christina Aguilera. I was the Candyman and I coached and choreographed most of that video and worked with her privately. I've done several videos. I recently did a campaign called Love is Love is Love with Leanne Rimes, and we did a music video where we danced on a bed, and we had guys dancing with girls, then girls dancing with girls, then girls dancing with boys, and then boys dancing with boys, and we had polyamorous couples dancing together in bed, and it was just a really nice way to say that love is love is love. And I got to direct it and did the work and the dancing with it, and it was lovely to do that. I've been heavily involved in that. We did the Love Loud Festival recently, which you and I reconnected and got to see one another at. So the career has brought me in many different spaces. I'm the first dancer to ever perform in the Kennedy Center for the National Symphony Orchestra, which was pretty cool. First time they ever built like a dance floor in front of the symphony. And so my sister Lacey and I got to perform there and direct a show there, which was pretty badass. I loved that. That was such a cool experience. Yeah, I mean, I just dance. It's my everyday thing. You know, I did the Quentin Tarantino film recently and I've done a lot of fun stuff, but ultimately my favorite thing to do in the world is to coach and to choreograph and to train. And it's not as exciting, I think, on paper, but it's the thing that I love the absolute most, I would say. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Let's keep going.
Did a lot of stuff. My career's great. Having a great time, teaching, doing a lot of stuff, developing judging systems, choreographing for the Olympics, for 2 Olympics now has been amazing. It's been great. Performing live in front of thousands of people, going on multiple tours, dance tours. It's been awesome. To travel the world and to connect with other dancers who don't speak any English but know my dancing, and to be able to teach them through movements is wonderful. And so I did that. I just doubled down on my career. I doubled down on my dancing, on my training. I didn't want my personality to be what made me successful. I wanted the actual movement. And so I would actually videotape myself in silhouette to make sure that my body was what was doing good. Like I was a crap dancer. Like I hated watching me dance on So You Think You Can Dance, for example, because I wasn't where I wanted to be. I was fresh off my mission, very rusty. And I can say honestly now that every year I've done something to improve my skill set as a dancer, as a teacher, and as a choreographer. And so, yeah, it's nice being in your mid-30s now, 34. I know somebody asked that on Facebook. I'm 34 years old, and I'm a better dancer today than I was at 24. Which is insane. That never is the case usually in the dance world or even in the athletics world. So yeah, it's good. I like it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the combination of your faith journey, your post-Mormon journey,
Yeah.
and relationships. And I imagine those weave in and out a little bit.
They do. So removing the professional side of things as I'm traveling and this, that, and the other, little by little.
Last we talked, you had taken a break and your professional ramped up.
Yeah, I took a major romantic break because like I just couldn't handle it. And I tried forcing myself to socially date just to like get to know people, and these guys just didn't compare to this man who represented Mormonism. I mean, honestly, truly, John, that's what it was. And I probably met a lot of great people, but I never felt the same power, the same magnetic feeling that I did with this prior guy because of that. And it wasn't him. Like in hindsight, like I've seen videos of he and I, and I'll see pictures of him occasionally on social media, and I'm like, like, what the hell was I thinking? And then I realized it was what he represented that was so powerful, strong, and really unrealistic. And so little by little, I would just chip away at that, heal from that, and kind of push it to the side. And then I really was able to kind of separate my healing process from the need to connect and to be intimate and to seek intimate connections with people. So it was great. I decided to, pardon my French, but
okay, wait, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
So you and I both would have grown up in the Mormon church where you can't touch a woman's breast. She can't touch you anywhere.
Yeah.
Like, before marriage, there's no sex and there's no anything.
Yeah.
It's just kissing and hugging, and making out is the worst thing. And you have, what's it like going from that to dating, men?
Yeah.
And I'm sure a lot of those men don't have that same history.
Yeah, none do.
And I'm not asking you to give gory details, but what's that like? No. Trying to go into that experience of not just dating, but also sexuality.
Well, sexuality in general, for me, it was a very interesting thing because, it's ironic. My family in general, my extended family in general, we're very open with talking about sex. You just can't have it. It was a very interesting dilemma and kind of group speak that we have with one another. So for me, that was very interesting. Going through that breakup, one thing that I actually decided to do was to figure out what my likes and needs were. And I truly suggest that people educate themselves on STD prevention, on safe sex practices. I think that's very important. I've had too many friends.
What are the highlights? What are the highlights?
What are the highlights?
Wear a condom.
Condoms, yes. Also, just asking, communicating with people that you're going to have sex with. When's the last time you had sex? Because, outside of condom wearing, if you have any kind of other foreplay, you can still get other STDs outside of HIV. You're preventing the big ones, but even for instance, oral sex, somebody's throat can still give you chlamydia and gonorrhea. And I immediately, the moment I left the church, I was online. I researched everything. I called all of my gay friends from the dance community. I'm like, help me out here. What do? I didn't even know that gay people had roles, like one is a top or a bottom or versatile top or this, that, and the other. There's dominants and submissives, and there's all these subcultures that can get you so confused.
And there's also these animal sort of...
There's puppies, there's bulls, there's bears, there's otters, there's wolves, there's twinks, there's twunks.
What are those things?
Usually it's a horrible subcategory of
It's a thing though, right?
It is a thing for a lot of people. I hate it. In the sense that I feel like, stop labeling yourself.
So give us some examples.
So for example, at the time when I did Mormon Stories, so I was probably 130 pounds, fresh-faced, clean cut. That's what you would call a twink.
Okay.
Because they're Twinkie, they're sweet on the outside and creamy in the middle or something, I guess, right? And then I started putting on muscle, right? So then I became a twunk because it's a cross between a twink and a hunk, right? If I were to gain a lot of weight and grow the beard out, but I'm still really fit, I'm an otter.
If you're skinny.
If you're skinny, you're fit, right? If you're really worked out and you're bald and shaved, you're a bull. If you're hairy and worked out or extra large, you're a bear. If you're young and you're dating somebody older than you, you're a cub. So there's like, let alone in other languages, there's puppies and cucciolos in Italian. Like there's all sorts of subcategorizations. And then there's a lot of people, what I didn't like, at least from my experience, is that whether your sexual role, if you have a proclivity to penetrate or be penetrated, that almost sometimes defines your role outside of the sexual realm, which I thought was really silly. Like I didn't connect the fact that
sort of like a male-female dominant,
yes,
passive sort of traditional, patriarchal kind of relationship.
And there are a lot of couples that have that in same-sex dynamics. There are a lot of couples that have that in heterosexual, heteronormative dynamics as well. Like, for example, I know a lot of couples that are heterosexual where even though the female, for example, obviously is being penetrated, and that can change because, there are toys that can flip that as well, that they're the dominant ones even though they're being penetrated. So you can have somebody who's submissive in bed, but the top in the relationship that penetrates. It's very confusing. And I feel like contingent to who you're dating, those dynamics shift and change often. But that's why I don't like it, because I feel like a lot of people's roles are relatively fixed. And to be honest with you, John, when I was first dating, I made everybody know that I was a top because I wanted people to know that I'm the man. And I fell victim to projecting that to people. And how horrible to do that. Like, how horrible to put something in that position, because it's insulting when someone comes up to you when you're with your partner and say, now who's the female of the relationship? It's insulting. It's truly insulting. It's insulting for the two men that you're talking to, the two cisgendered men, let alone it's insulting to anybody that might be trans. When what does a female of the relationship actually mean? You mean
it's insulting to women.
It's 100%
as if women
insulting.
Have a role in relationships.
Right. So what does that mean to you exactly? Yeah. It's like, why would you even say that? Now, most of the time they're asking like who is penetrating and who is not. And I think that's a horrible thing to ask in general, personally. And so I've learned to just let go of that and not try and label myself that. Sometimes on Instagram I'll do like live question and answers, and that is asked more often than not if I'm a top or a bottom. And it's like, and to be honest with you, it would be really easy for my pride, the side of me, to just say, I'm a top. Deal with it. But to be honest with you, I don't want to even say that anymore because I hate that labeling. Like, we're already marginalized so much in society. Let's just love one another and have communication with each other personally on what we want to do when we explore something in the bedroom, right? And one thing that I noticed is I was dating a lot of these guys after this guy, just brief, short stints, little relationships here and there. And I was dating bottoms, quote unquote bottoms, and I was the top. And what I realized is because it was such a fixed role, it trickled outside of the bedroom. I had to pick where we went to eat every single time. I had to be the one that give you gifts. I had to be the one to cuddle you always. I had to be the one to tell you I loved you. And so it was very, very almost selfish and cyclical and weird, where it was so one-sided that these younger guys and these smaller guys that I was dating were just fulfilling this fixed role that I was creating unintentionally. And so I stopped that. In fact, I dated a guy who I'm 5'9", 180 pounds, and I was dating a guy that was 6'1", 200 pounds. And that was weird to publicly walk into like a bar to watch like a Laker game or something. We don't really go to gay bars, but like walk into a sports bar and people walk in and they're not sure if we're gay. If they see us touch one another, they know. And to just walk in and realize that people are probably thinking that I'm the quote unquote female of this relationship. And it was a very interesting thing, but as you fall for people, it doesn't matter how tall or how short they are. I want that forever factor when I'm dating somebody. And so that's a big thing that I encountered, John, where I had to get over a lot of that. I had to get over proving that I was a man, proving that I was macho or this, that, and the other. And you know what the ironic thing is, John? Is once I've done that, I've felt more of a man by not caring what other people think, by letting my relationships being dictated and predicated upon our intimacy and our communication. I feel more of a man and more stronger and more secure with who I am as an individual now when I just said, fuck it, right? As opposed to worrying about these perceptions of what people think. So if I date somebody that's younger than me, or older than me, I don't care what labels you give me. Go ahead and think about it. Because I know what's happening in the bedroom. And frankly, no one else needs to know. I could care less.
And we're simultaneously saying that it's rude and horrible to be asking these sorts of questions. And I'm asking them, but I'm doing it partly, well, just because it's a thing and it's something people have to work through. But also, let's just say there's young gay Mormons or even middle-aged gay Mormons that are kind of going to be going through this.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll give them some shortcuts or some perspective to handle it better. So I realize that I'm asking some of these questions that are kind of rude.
No, it's
but
fine.
It's hopefully for a greater purpose.
Ask as much like cliche, taboo, insulting stuff, because I feel like it is good that people hear this, because I get those questions all the time privately from a lot of closeted individuals on Facebook, on Instagram, all the time. And and it's fine. And the gay community is always going to be sex driven. And I get that, or generally speaking, and I'm okay with that. Like, and I embrace that to an extent, and it's fine. And you need to learn to love yourself. And I've censored my body, and I've dealt with so many body image issues over my life. Like, it's one thing just to kind of get over it and to be honest with it. And if I can suggest anything, like, as a gay man, if you haven't had sex, if you haven't experimented with that, first study, figure out medically what you need to do. And also, if you are going to be on the receiving end, like, understand how to prepare so that you don't have a negative experience. Because, sorry, audience members, we do something called butt sex, and, poop comes out there. And so you can have really messy, shameful experiences that can traumatize you. I had a partner for a minute that didn't want to have any anal penetration because he had a very bad experience the first time he tried. And it was messy and this, that, and the other. So there's ways to prepare where you're going to be fine. And it's very simple once you know your body and you know how to prepare for that. But, it's something that I feel like people need to do their research on, and don't just jump into something. Like, there's going to be plenty of opportunities for you to have sex, especially in the gay world. If you want it, you can find it any day, any moment of the week. And so just be prepared. Do the research, experiment with yourself, explore yourself first. I feel like touching yourself, I feel like masturbation and trying different things on you is a great way to understand what feels right for you. And that way you'll be able to communicate with a potential sexual partner if there's a compatibility. And I feel like that's more important, to have that dialogue than just jumping into something scary and rough that could potentially hurt you or get you sick.
Are there some books or some websites that are really good resources for learning about healthy sexuality as a gay man that you're aware of?
There's a great book called The Joy of Gay Sex. That was really, really informative for me. It really helped me. It has some Kama Sutra things that help you with just like the ergonomics of it all, because it's different than obviously hetero dynamics. But one thing that I'm going to say, and I think is pretty cool about being gay, and listen, there's a lot of negatives, there's a lot of knocks against us people, but if you are two gay men, the one really cool thing that we have that no other combination of sexual partnerships have naturally is the ability to be inside of one another in any given sexual experience without the use of toys, without the use of assistance. The piping works in that way. So that's the one thing that I feel like we do have something kind of cool there, right? Where you can actually, I find it beautiful and kind of poetic that you two can be inside of each other if you wanted it. And I think that's kind of unique. There's no other combination of genders that can do that naturally. So I think it's kind of cool. But so just get over it. Get over the labels. Just be you, and
if some want to say it's just an unhealthy, it's not natural, what do you say to that? It's God didn't make us that way. That's not how our body parts are supposed to be working together. What do you say to that?
If God didn't want us to have butt sex, then he wouldn't have made a prostate. Because it's quite pleasureful. Like, to stimulate a prostate when it's my favorite thing to do, to stimulate another person's prostate. But like, beyond that, it feels good and it's beautiful. And I've had sex and I've made love in the same kind of sexual scenario and archetype, and it's beautiful. I can make love to somebody that I love that way, rectally. I don't have to. There's many ways to create intimacy physically between you and your partner, but it's wonderful to do that. And it can be beautiful, it can be fun, it can be exciting, it can be sexy, it can be crazy. And I feel like there's a whole spectrum of sexual exploration. Like, if it's okay if I say a cuss word, I believe that there's a time to make love, there's a time to have sex, there's a time to fuck. And I think that all of those three things can be good. Sorry for those of you that remember me from 7 years ago in Mormon Stories. I don't think I would have said these things at that time. But I learned that there is expression in all three of those facets, that I find that there's value in all of those things. And it took me a long time to figure all that out. But Joy of Gay Sex is a great book. Also, another book to read is just The Velvet Rage. I don't know if you know The Velvet Rage. John, if you read the first 2 chapters, life-affirming, life-changing. And it basically talks about falling under 2 different gay archetypes that really helped me change my perspective. And I'd love to share this with people. The Velvet Rage, it is such a good book. It talks about 2 things, that 2 men, the Velvet Rage is basically you hide behind a velvet curtain and you play a character, right? So like gay people in general, you're going to find 2 types of gay men most of the time. In stereotypical TV shows in the world, you're going to find one that works out, is an Adonis-sized, perfect face, perfect everything, buff, wearing Speedos all the time kind of guy, right? Not a hair on their body. And it's the kind of guy aesthetically that straight women say, gosh, if only he were straight, right? Or you're going to find that girlfriend, Jess Jack, super campy, super gay, super flamboyant, performing all the time kind of gay guy that every straight woman wants to be best friends with. And those 2 people in general are maybe caricatures of the person that's truly inside. This person is trying to build this muscle and this level of perfection because of how insecure growing up closeted and being gay is. Probably being rejected by brothers and friends and not being good at sports. Those are the ones that are lifting all the time, most of the time, to find that level of attraction and to be what they never were when they were younger.
Is it also just, it's a competitive marketplace and you want to look good? Is there some of that?
Yeah, we can talk about just like gay competition in a second. Yeah, but I think a lot of it is that. I feel like the ones that parade that are probably dealing with something with that. Or the Jess Jack characters are the ones that they can be stronger, they can talk down to anybody, they have a mouth on them, and they can entertain the room because ultimately they're the ones that are probably going through so much torment and so much pain and not falling under that traditional male archetype. And so instead they take it to an extreme. We take things to extremes in general, especially if you're closeted, because we're always putting up some sort of front. And I've tried really hard post-Mormon Stories in particular to break myself of that and to embrace it all, to love all walks of life. And dating multiple people after that first really tumultuous relationship, it's helped me understand that, because I've fallen in love with different shapes, sizes, ages, races, and just personality types. And it's been great. And it's been great to see that what I've noticed is the people that I traditionally tend to connect with are those that have kind of lost those extremes and just are who they are. And I can see in intimate moments a little bit of that spectrum of just human emotions. Sometimes we can be a little bit more zany. Sometimes we can be a little bit more serious, a little bit more this, a little bit more that. And I embrace it all now. It's great. That's been one of the biggest discoveries that I've had since Mormon Stories.
Is there anything else you want to share about body image? You said that's a topic you wanted to talk about.
Yeah. I mean, you know what's funny? It's a combination of 2 things. Being on a television show and reading a lot of the things. I mean, So You Think You Can Dance did a lot of great things for me, but it also made me realize how unattractive I am as a person. It made me, you read these message boards and people that may have not voted for me are like, I hate his hair, I hate his face, his smile is so ugly, his teeth are so big, he's so scrawny, his body is so unattractive, everyone else is cute on the show except, like you read a lot of negative things and that stuff affects you, let alone I was in a very, very precious emotional state at the time. So, and then as a gay man, what we were talking about, it's a highly competitive market. We're in an era of social media where we're seeing photoshopped bodies all the time. And not only that, video can be photoshopped now. So you're seeing videos of people and they're not as big as they really are. You're seeing these Avengers movies with men wearing padded suits and doing steroids to look the way they are. This isn't a natural space. We are the new Barbie dolls. You know, I think gay men in particular, there's an expectation to look a certain way, to always be fit. The one cool thing I like about the whole like bear and otter community is the fact that if you have extra love handles, some people find that really attractive and it's okay, right? So I want people to be healthy. And as long as you're healthy mentally, emotionally, and physically, that's all I care about. And I hope that that's what I can just suggest to the people. Just worry about that. If you want to be built up and work out for you. If it gives you a certain level of confidence, great. But if you feel like you have to do that, then the muscles don't last forever, right? So if you want to feel attractive, great. And I started working out for my training, for dancing, and I started putting on weight, and I started building muscle because I felt like it made me feel attractive, and I started attracting different types of people, and I liked that feeling for a very long time. And I like being able to truthfully be naked and feel a little bit more confident with a partner. But having been in long-term relationships now, you have months where you eat a little bit more. For me, I have to put on a lot of fat so that I can put on muscle depending on my dance seasons. And so to have not the abs or something like that at one point, or to be too skinny after you've been really focused on competition, you learn to get over it. Like when you're with a partner, you shouldn't expect to just have a perfect body all the time. Who cares, right? But I had terrible body image issues. I look at pictures, I look at videos of myself. I'm hypercritical. I'm a perfectionist when it comes to my dancing. Nothing's ever good. For those of the viewers that didn't know this, but John and Bill, who's helping us out today, came last night to the studio to watch a snippet of me practicing and training. I'm pretty intense, and nothing's ever perfect. Nothing's ever right. It can get better, but...
You described it as Olympic level training, and that's how I experienced it. I think, oh, he dances. No, your rehearsals are as technical and as intense and as scary, dangerous, physical, demanding, extreme. It felt like an extreme sport. It felt like watching an extreme sport.
And it's funny, you should see me when I'm watching the footage afterwards, right? I mean, I'm sitting there usually on an exercise bike, cooling down, just telling myself that I'm dog pissed, that I'm terrible. I'm my inner dancer is very, very dark in terms of how I'm very critical of myself, but it's also gotten me to where I'm at. And so there's this fine line of kind of straddling that darkness, embracing it, but also not letting it own me, so to speak. And I feel like that same negative inner voice is very similar to my body image issues. I always see myself, I look in a mirror all damn day, right? Or I'm a public figure and I have to see pictures and videos that people post of me, and I'm never happy with it. And people always say, oh, he looks like he's gained weight. Oh, you go to these events that people see you maybe once a year. Oh, you don't look so good. Are you balding? Oh, your skin looks bad. Have you been sleeping? Are you taking your vitamins? You get this from thousands of people who know you but don't really know you. And it's like, if you really know me, my friends just know to shut the hell up and say, hi, you look great. And that's all you have to say if you're really friendly with somebody, instead of picking somebody apart so easily. I would never go up to you, John, and say, gosh, looks like you gained a little weight here, John. No, I would never say that. Who does that? But because I was on TV and I was criticized by judges, people feel like they have the right way to do it. And it's given me a huge ass complex. Now, on the flip side, I don't know how much of that is the Mormon experience, but I do know this. I know that from the Mormon experience, I was told to reject my body. I was told to reject pleasure. I was told to reject all of that stuff until I was married. Let alone, because I was attracted to men, I would look away from men all the time. So even in moments where I feel like my body's improving or my aesthetics have improved, I would feel shame about that. And so my body image issues have been through the roof, very difficult. I struggle with it daily.
Still do. Oh
my God, yes. And I actually made in May, I decided this year was the year that I'm going to really try and overcome my body image issues. And so recently I did 3 things. I've been doing this artistic experiment. The one thing that I know is if I can overcome something, it's usually through my art. It's usually through artistic expression, and it helps me heal. And so I decided to film a dance video in a shower, a see-through shower, when I was in New York City in May.
I saw that on Instagram.
Oh, you did? Okay.
No. Talk about it.
Okay. Yeah.
I did.
Yeah. So I decided to say, screw it. I'm not going to do any push-ups beforehand. I'm not going to go to the gym beforehand, because you can work out and get a bit of a pump and feel like. I even came here thinking I probably should have done some arm lifts to look a little better on camera. And I'm thinking, what the hell? I'm going to be pouring my soul out. Who the hell cares, right? So I decided to film this video one day when I walked around the streets of New York, and I was in a gayborhood. I was in Hell's Kitchen, which is predominantly gay in New York. And I'm walking by and all these beautiful men are passing me. And I'm like, I will never be able to mount to this, but who the fuck cares? So I set up my camera. I decided to improvise to a song. called Naturally by Sean McDonald. Ironically, he's a Christian artist, but his music is wonderful. And it was just like, I'm going to love myself naturally. And I'm going to love who I am naturally and not worry about it. And I decided to go full frickin' Monty and just dance on it. And obviously I had to edit out, my wiener and my butt. But yeah, it was very interesting to learn how to edit that, because that's a skill to like blur things out but not blur the whole body out. And it was great. I felt so weird doing it, and I ended up improvising, I think, for like almost 3 hours in the shower and dancing. And it was funny to watch the earlier content vice the later content, because I just learned to just not care. I wasn't flexing, I was just moving, I was expressing, and it was great. And the song was looping over and over again. And I edited it, I posted it, and it was my way to say, look, I'm dealing with this. I'm scared as all hell to do this. I have a feeling that people will find this very unattractive and poor and bad. And
or they might say you're just exhibitionist, you're just like dramatic, you're just trying to get attention.
Right.
Diva or whatever.
Sure.
Right?
If anything, yeah. I feel like it's going to be two like very extreme sides of the spectrum, right? And what's really interesting is I wrote a little bit about it afterwards and posted it. And for me, whether people believe it or not, like me doing that, it took a lot. It took a lot. And to watch it afterward.
A lot of what?
It took a lot of just overcoming this fear. It took a lot of just ignoring that dark passenger that's in my head that says, this is embarrassing. You look terrible. And it was just to say, screw it. I'm not going to listen to that anymore.
Like exposure therapy against your anxieties,
against
and your
my anxiety,
intrusive thoughts.
Yeah, and so if people want to say that it was like this exhibitionist thing, fine. I mean, they can, and maybe there's something to that extent where you are seeking some sort of validation. I think we all do that in social media to an extent, but
in your heart,
to press that send button to post it, that was really hard. I mean, like anxiety, sweating hard, and I did that. I did a couple of photography shoots of me like almost naked, tastefully so. And then recently I did another one where I modeled for a very world-renowned male figure artist named Jordan Mejias. He was just in CNN. He had a huge write-up on like bringing back the male form and gay erotic paintings and this, that, and the other. And I'm doing a book. I modeled for his book that he's doing. And he's taking, I can't mention it, sorry, but it's a cool book he's doing. It's very tasteful, but he always has nude models. And the people that I've modeled for him, I've watched his page. I was a fan of his work for years. And these are like beautifully, perfectly toned, fit, built guys. They're professional models. And he saw my dance video and he messaged me. He's like, Benji, I see that you're in New York City right now. I would love for you to come and model for me if you feel comfortable. And I wasn't. And I'm like, I'll go and try it. Like immediately I said, no, no, I can't do that. It's stupid. And then immediately before I hit that send button responding to him, I thought, no, this is my dark passenger. Who cares? Show my birthday suit. If people don't want to see it, they don't have to see it. Like it's a specific page you can visit if you want to do it. And I'm like, okay, I'm just going to go out and do it. I visited him, long story short. We're sitting there in his studio loft in the West Village in New York. And he's 71 years old, wonderful man. And he sat down and I'm like, is he going to tell me to take my clothes off now? Like, how do we do this? What is going on? And he literally sat me down. We probably talked for 2 hours. So it's maybe midnight at this point. And I'm thinking, is he going to try and offer me a drink? Like, what is he going to do? Nothing. He just talked about life, talked about my family. And I realized he was disarming me. He was totally disarming me. He was getting to know me a little bit as a person. And then he's like, well, if you want to do this, we can. No big deal. If not, it was great to know you. And I'm like, no, let's do it. So I went full Monty. I posed and I had to hit that position. We did like 3 or 4 pictures together. And you hit the pose for almost an hour. And I'll tell you this much, like dancing is one thing because at least I know I can move good, right? I can control my body, but to be still and have one person drawing every nook and cranny of your body, it was so weird hitting that position. At first, you're shaking, you're freaking out. He tapes your body in certain positions so that you won't move. And I remember about 20 minutes into it, like I just kind of exhaled. And there was something about being still, being vulnerable, letting that go. And it was wonderful. It was actually meditative for me. So going there was hugely cathartic. And afterwards he shows me the picture and it was one of those like, and I'm sure he exaggerated or this, that, and the other, but to see what his eyes saw in my body, as opposed to what my eyes see when I see my body. And he's like, I want you to see this is exactly how I saw you. And he's like, Benji, I'm a world-renowned painter. This is your body. And when I looked at it, I'm like, it wasn't my body. That's not me at all. Like, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. He's like, Benji, this is your body. And it's perfect. It doesn't matter if you have abs, who cares? Because I said, well, I don't do this and I don't have that. He said, no. He's like, you're perfect the way you are. And he just gave me this huge hug. I'm butt naked, by the way. And I'm just like, oh my gosh. And it was this amazing experience for me. It was transcendent for me, truly. And it was great.
And to have another gay man not be sexualizing you and just, what is that kind of thing nice?
It was wonderful. Yeah. It was normal. It was calm. It was great. And he said, he's like, the next time let's do another one. And we did different poses where I wanted to expose my flaws. I wanted to show my abs. I wanted to expose the fact that I feel like my legs are out of proportion to my body and this, that, and the other. It was great. It was so cool. I'm like, and he said, well, what do you want to pose? And I'm like, well, I want to pose in ways that I don't feel comfortable. I want to pose and showcase and model what I don't feel comfortable showing. And we did that. It was the coolest therapeutic thing. So shout out to Jordan.
What's his name again?
Jordan Mejias.
Mejias. M-E-J-I-A-S.
Mejias.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. He's a dear friend now. He's great. And so he's like my gay Yoda.
I love it.
He's amazing. Yeah.
Let's check in with our listeners. Jen writes, if we could all only have that experience, how liberating.
Do it.
Juliet writes, I'd love the name of his photographer. We just gave it to her. Julianne writes, Benji, thank you so much for being so open and vulnerable. I'm amazed by you and your authenticity. Much love. Janine writes, so appreciate his honesty and willingness to be so open and informative. Lynn Moore writes, the video is beautiful. So she's talking about, she must have seen the video that you posted. Shout out to Lynn. Hey,
Thanks,
Lynn.
Lynn. Hi, Lynn.
Lloyd writes, as a longtime competitive bodybuilder, I can relate to a lot of the story. Thanks for being so real, Benji.
Yeah.
Kat writes, I understand being your own worst critic. I do the same thing when I sing. Benji, you are amazing. You were my favorite part of So You Think You Can Dance. Sorry, Benji.
No, it's okay. I don't care. It's fine. It's fine, guys. Thank you.
Curtis writes, I find this discussion fascinating. Thank you so much. Really quickly, Natasha, hey Natasha, I don't know if you're still joining us, but Natasha Ofer Parker's on the line. She says we need these types of candid discussions with our gay youth. So I'm going to be vulnerable just for a second.
Yeah.
I, as you said the F word a couple times, talked about butt sex.
I'm sorry.
No. I had this like, oh my gosh, this is the 1,000th episode of Mormon Stories Podcast. Are we? But then I thought, but that's just like the old me, right? It's almost like the you.
Yeah.
Who was scared about showing your body, right?
Yeah.
Like, why? I would just like to say, for you, for gay men, even for Mormons,
yeah.
Why would it be useful to have a discussion about butt sex, about use the F word, about sexuality, about nakedness?
Yeah,
I think it's important.
Yeah,
and I want to hear, I want to hear sort of like what you think. Especially for our gay youth that are killing themselves in Mormonism, but out of Mormonism, it's probably not always easy.
It's not.
Can you talk about why this is an important, I think this is an important discussion to have,
okay,
but I don't want to have to defend myself. Why do you think, as a gay man, ex-Mormon, why do you think this might be a helpful conversation, not just for gay ex-Mormon youth or even gay Mormon youth, but for allies and friends and family?
I think everybody needs to be educated on the other side of the field, the other team. But for especially the gay youth of the world, I think for me to say, if I were to speak like this and say, now when you're having anal sex or anal cunnilingus, if we're starting to use terms like that, it also starts putting it into this like professional sense. And I really feel like if you can see people, for instance, I know we're having a conversation that's being streamed right now. But if we're talking amongst friends, I feel like that's an easier way for the youth to relate. The fact that I can say the word, and I spell it funny, Buttsecks. It's just funny to say butt sex like that, like one word. There's actually a meme on it, like a meme about that on the internet. Anyways, I feel like dispelling the formalities of it and dispelling the naughtiness of it.
Also the shame and the dirtiness and the darkness, right?
Yeah, the darkness about it in particular. I feel like just to be a little bit more open about it and say, yeah, we have sex where people poop. sometimes. And not everybody does. There's a lot of actually homosexual couples that just don't like anal sex, and that's okay too. They tend to use frauding, just rubbing against one another, or they use toys, or they just do oral sex, or other forms of mutual masturbation, and that's great too. But I feel like we need to have this conversation, John, because here's the thing: Mormon Benji or immediately post-Mormon Benji would not be able to say this stuff right now. And I feel like I want my friends, my gay listeners, my non-gay listeners to just treat this like a conversation if we were talking one-on-one, so that we don't have this formality, because there's so much of a buffer and a front that we put up in the church that I think we need to let that go a little bit to be a little bit more human. And so I do apologize to anybody watching right now if I've said anything because of my crass words. If it's coming off as offensive, it's not my intent, but it is my intent to be real, to be raw. I do want to be respectful to our listeners, but ultimately it's butt sex. Like, it's butt sex. So deal with it. Butt sex.
Natasha says, we need butt sex comments. What better place than the 1,000th episode of Mormon Stories?
Yes. It took us 1,000 episodes for butt sex. It's good.
And Jen writes, I second that and add that it is needed with our non-gay youth. How in the world can this sort of conversation be healthy for non-gay youth?
Well, I think for our non-gay youth in particular, they need to understand that there's a whole other world. If you have friends that are gay, family members that are gay, to understand that they have a whole other experience, a whole other navigation that they have to deal with that is not public. We usually have sex ed at some point. We don't have gay sex ed. And I think it's important that, at least 15% of the world might be queer or experiencing something like this, and it's important. On the flip side, can I just say, and I'm sure someone might mention this, but a lot of hetero men message me on Facebook all the time about how to have themselves rectally stimulated, prostate stimulation. How can I get my girlfriend, how can I get my wife to embrace that? How can I prepare for this for my wife because she wants to try putting a toy on or using that? Listen, the world is new right now, okay? And I feel like straight people can embrace a lot with what gay people do, because the way we please ourselves is a way that heterosexual people could please themselves as well, right? So I feel like it's very important that we can have these dialogues. There's a little bit of an overlap here. There's much more of a close Venn diagram than two separate circles of what gay sex is and what it can be in the heterosexual world. So straight people, gay people, somewhere in the middle, poly, whatever you are, whatever kind of level of fluidity you have, I think it's important to understand these things. My straight friends and I have conversations about gay sex all the time to help them. My straight friends.
Natasha says women like it too.
They do. I was going to say, butt sex is kind of fun, and it's fun to explore. And my good friends ask me on tips on how to do that all the time. It's great to have that conversation. And it's funny because I want to let people know this, even with my family, my mom, my dad, I'm very open to them about the sex that I have. And it's a very interesting thing as an adult. It's we have these conversations. Some people don't talk about sex at all, but if I feel for instance, my cousins, they're all heterosexual or identifying heterosexual men. They're married. They talk about sex. Oh, I love my wife, love my boobs. They're so beautiful. They're all Mormon, Oh yeah, I want that baby. And if they can say that in public, then I'm going to talk about, I love my boyfriend's butt. He's got the best ass. I'm going to say it in front of them. And I remember the first time we were at a holiday together and I finally did that, it was crickets in the room. And then finally, one of my cousins, she's like, right on, Benji. She's like, you get that butt. You enjoy that. And it's one of those things that I feel like we need to normalize this dialogue, because it's unfair to censor us, right, when you can talk about it amongst your friends. So
for sure.
Yeah.
There's also just getting over being scared to talk about things. Let's even take it one level higher.
Yeah.
We have body parts. Natasha says we all have butts.
Yeah.
But also we all have sex, or most of us do, and we're all
sexual.
We're all sexual. And there's even, let's just say, BYU students that don't want to have intercourse, but they're doing things like soaking, they're rubbing against each other.
Docking,
Docking,
yeah.
There's Levi loving, there's, and we just need to, the more we talk about things openly, sunlight's the best disinfectant. We learn, we do things safer, we do things healthier.
Yeah.
We learn to have more fun. And even taking it out of sexuality, we just need to get over our hangups to just be comfortable talking and being candid about what's real.
Yeah.
And this is real.
It dispels a lot, doesn't it? Yeah, it is real. It's real. It's honest. And I'll say this, guys, for those of you that are even the chemistry between two different people, now that I've had, this sounds so weird to say, but now that I've had multiple sexual partners, it's interesting because our chemistry, me between one person and another, the dynamic of what they like or what we like together, where our Venn diagram overlaps, our rhythm, everything is different sexually with each person that you're with. And if you're repeating the same things, then maybe you're not really intuitive as a lover. So I think it's good to just always have that conversation about likes and wants. And I know that with the long-term relationships that I've been in, things change over time sexually. We develop or we explore, or we don't like certain things that maybe we liked earlier on. Maybe it was the honeymoon phase. Maybe we were being braver earlier on, or the opposite. Maybe we're getting bored and it's a little plateauy. And so we want to change it up and spice it up a little bit. I think it's important. I think it's important to kind of have that dialogue with one another. And, ironically, Natasha, if you're listening still, I love you. She coached me for a very long time and helped me kind of transition out into the big bad gay world. And she was very candid with me and wonderful. And I feel like a lot of the work that we did together has kind of brought this change in me to be more open and vulnerable and raw. So
if you need a good sex therapist, natashaparker.org. She's one of Mormonism's few certified sex therapists. Check her out.
Yeah.
Love to Natasha. I'm going to just share a couple more comments people are making. Lisa writes, he is being his true self. He is communicating experience of how he found his true identity. It's an opportunity for others to see someone who is living his truth. He is happy, and as others out there, we need to accept that, learn from it, find a way in which we can be happy for people who have found their true happiness and can go on in life living their true reality and not living a life of pain and shame to make others happy, but living a fake reality in themselves.
Wow.
That's Lisa.
Thanks, Lisa.
Elizabeth writes, I love that anal sex is being discussed. If we could discuss the more taboo aspects of sex and sexuality, we can help normalize the wealth of sexual identities and experiences out there, which adds so much richness to the world. Natasha likes to say, don't yuck my yum, and and don't yum my yuck. In other words, let's be sensitive to each other's likes and dislikes. And I think that goes beyond sexuality as well. Okay, so we've talked about sexuality. Let's talk about emotional intimacy and companionship now. Is there anything else you want to say about the people you've dated and the relationships you've had, without hurting someone's feelings unnecessarily?
I think, since just to finish, more to cap off on the sexual aspect, there's something that's prevalent in today's society. Gay men marginalize themselves all the time. And I would suggest to anybody that's venturing into the big bad world to really try hard to not subcategorize yourself often. Just be a human being, connect with other human beings. If someone wants to call you that, whether you want to correct them or not, I like to correct people when someone subcategorizes me, because I don't want that to be part of like our vernacular and how we're speaking with one another. I think it's important to establish those boundaries. And here's the thing too, a lot of people don't know what to say. A lot of heterosexual friends, sometimes they don't know how to engage conversations about knowing about that side of your life. And so it's important if they say something to kind of match it. I think that's a really great way to kind of gauge somebody's level of comfortability, and to be always willing to answer questions. I think it's important, and to correct when there's some sort of taboo thing mentioned or cliche thing that insults you. I think there's a bigger source of heterosexism in the world than even than homophobia. I think that the feeling that straight people are still superior to gays is, I think, more rampant today, because it's easier to say, look, I'm not a homophobe, I love gay people, but to still think that you're superior being a cisgendered male and female together because you can procreate, that's kind of a little pet peeve of mine. As well as in general, there's something that we call in the gay community called bottom shaming, where like if you see somebody that does something effeminate, for example, or something very stereotypically gay, or even something just very vulnerable, like crying on camera, you go, oh, he's such a bottom, meaning he's the female in the relationship, he's the one that's being penetrated. that's like a big thing right now. Bottom shaming is a bad thing. And look, it takes two to tango here. Like somebody's got to be a bottom at some point. And what I would suggest is instead of saying that you are a top or you are a bottom, you can say that you prefer to do that as a sexual act as opposed to letting it be
a label,
an identity thing. Yeah. That's a really big thing. A lot of younger youth message me about that specifically. So for those of you that are listening to this, I hope that gives you some clarity. Who cares? Like, you're wonderful either way. And trust me, like, if we didn't have bottoms in the world or people that wanted to bottom, we wouldn't be having butt sex. So like, you need this. Like, it takes two. It's amazing. Women are amazing. Men are amazing.
It's offensive to women as well.
It's very offensive to women. Yeah. Speaking of that, so connecting all of that together, I would say try at least at some point to try it all. To get to a place where you can get past your hangups or what you think you have a natural proclivity to, and try it all a little bit. I feel like if you can have something in a relationship that's a little bit more give and take, I feel like that has a little bit more value and a little bit more double the intimacy that you can have. But find what you like and figure it out and communicate, and it could change and it can evolve over time. There's nothing wrong with that. And stop it with those sub-labels. It's just silly. Anywho, so you said now we're talking about emotional, mental,
just relationships. Spiritual. Is there anything you want to say about not the sex, but just companionship, relationships you've had, what you've learned? And I'm guessing that Mormonism is going to tie in a little bit.
I think it will. Yeah. We can talk if you want to talk. We mentioned that a little bit last night. So I'm not going to give certain specifics just to kind of protect the innocent here, but I had a long-term relationship. A long-term relationship, we'll just say that, very long-term. And interestingly enough, it wasn't very, on paper, it's damaged. It was very damaged. It had a lot of problems with it. And what I fell victim to, and I didn't even realize this is many years now after having left the church, and you're sleeping over at each other's houses, or you're dating, or you're living together, you bought a house, whatever it might be, you're together. I fell under a very interesting trap where I fell at one point into a loveless, sexless, intimacy-free relationship.
Which I just have to know, we just spent all that time talking about sex.
Yeah.
And what I hear from all the gay people I talk to is being gay isn't predominantly about having sex.
No, it's not.
Just like I don't run around saying I'm a heterosexual and I have heterosexual sex. I don't even think about it.
Yeah.
Once you get into your life, you're just living your life.
Yeah.
You're in a relationship.
Yeah.
And it's washing the dishes, it's cooking dinner, it's going to work.
It's paying your taxes.
It's playing games, it's having fun, it's fighting, it's about a million things in addition to sex.
Yeah.
Or it can be about not having sex, because for any relationship, it's going to get old at some point as well.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to kind of preface it. Now jump in. So
no, I think that's great. And you're right. Like it's such a small part of it all. And I feel like we just were, especially younger people, like with the libido kicking in, we think about sex all the time. I have a very high libido in general. So I think I'm a very sexual person in general. I'm high energy. I'm very affectionate. And I think because of that, for whatever it means, like there's that. But especially when we're constantly thinking, don't think about sex, don't think about your temptations, fight that. The moment you leave Mormonism, you're free. And it's that rubber ball effect that you mentioned in the first podcast, where sometimes that rubber ball, once you drop it, it bounces up and everywhere. And listen, I had my fun. Like I experimented, I explored safely. And it was a great thing. Like it was a wonderful experience, and I connected in various ways with different individuals. Not like I'm some sort of like uber whore or anything, but I lived, and it was great. And I suggest everybody try it. I feel like there's a really awesome book called The Ethical Slut. Love that book. Try that one out. Anyways, but I am at heart a monogamist. And so being in a relationship, and I feel like people will fall under this problem at some point. I was attracted to somebody, and I didn't realize this until fairly recently. I was attracted to an individual, a partner of mine, because of the fact that there were some issues emotionally and psychologically with him where he didn't want to have sex at all. It had to deal with depression and other issues, and didn't have sex, couldn't tell me he loved me, couldn't hold my hand, didn't want to even kiss me goodnight. And what's funny is I stuck around long with this person.
Like more than a month.
A lot more. Try years.
Yeah.
And because of my Mormon upbringing, in hindsight. And it wasn't until pseudo recently that I was having a conversation with him. I'm like, I stuck around because of Mormonism, because I was taught for time and all eternity. You deal with something in this life, you're going to have something in the next life. And even though I didn't use those words in my head, I feel like the conditioning kept me there longer than I should have before we started to make some changes.
So those Mormon hooks were deep.
Deep. I was hanging on them. I was floating Mission Impossible style on them. And so what I've done recently to help fix that is I've written down on my phone every time I have like a visceral reaction or a conditioned reaction that I feel like Mormonism gave me. And it's been really nice to kind of identify, oh my God, I still react to this scenario because of Mormonism. You had that visceral response when I said fuck, right?
Yeah, I still do.
Fuck. Anyway, so yeah, it's insane that we still have these things. Now, granted, that could just be, I don't like foul language. I get it. But read the mother tongue and find out where the word fuck came from, and it's kind of funny. It's a toilet seat. Come on, right? It's just a word. So does God say that's bad, or does a society that voted for a Cheeto-skinned man say that that's bad? Or anyways, that's a whole nother story. But what I'm getting at, John, is I fell victim to complacency because Mormonism told me that gay love isn't real. Mormonism told me that I don't deserve gay sex. Mormonism told me that I don't deserve intimacy. Mormonism told me that I should feel alone.
You should be sad.
I should be sad. I should be broken.
Punished.
Mm-hmm. And so I fell victim into a long-term relationship in that space. And the hardest part is this person, the reason why I fell for him is because he was such the antithesis to the typical gay community. He didn't want to sleep around, didn't want to sleep at all. But he's also a wonderful person, on a side note, like many wonderful qualities, funniest person I've ever met, this, that, and the other. But we fell under this. And I think I actually kind of became a crutch, an enabler of him to not get better, because that's a psychological issue. That's an emotional thing that he should be working on, right? And I think because I just stuck it out, you bite, grin, and bear it, you white knuckle everything, you make it happen, a lot of cold showers, you make it work. And that's not right. Right? So I even recently have fallen victim to that. And I just wanted to let people know, sometimes you think when you're out, when you're finally drinking coffee, you're finally having sex, you're free of the Mormon hooks, as you called them, right? You're not. You're not. You could be so well adjusted, but there are still so many things that are interlaced and interwoven in your psyche and every fiber of your being, right? Where it causes you to react in a way where you're still wearing those lenses of forced Mormonism, if you will. Not to say that all things in Mormonism are bad. I think, John, you've done a really great job in showcasing the greatness of Mormonism as well. But in truth, it's done a number on me. And I can only imagine other people that don't have the resources, that are more closeted or that more wild, they don't have the ability to talk to a professional about this. I can only imagine what they're going through and what their relationships are like. And some people have found it. Some people have been able to clear themselves and rid it a lot faster than I think I have. But I also held on to Mormonism to my nail beds. I held on to it. And so part of me, I think, never truly washed the nail beds out. I had a rebound of Mormonism, and now I've had to cleanse relationships free of that conditioning.
And that's 7 years later, right?
7 years later, let alone I went through change therapy for 12 years, let alone I went through therapy afterwards. That's 7 years later. Insane, right? But I'm aware of it. And I've had my breakthroughs and had my breakdowns. And I've dealt with heartbreak. And the biggest thing that I can say with relationships in closing this chapter, if you will, is having a breakup or being hurt or being heartbroken after Mormonism, especially with me being a non-believer, it's interesting because you don't have the all will be made right in the back of your head. You can't compartmentalize. You can't have that almost cognitive dissonance of saying things are going to be better in the next life. I don't believe in that. So I have to deal with the pain now. I have to deal with the stains now. And I find that to be hard, difficult, but ultimately so much more beneficial in the long run, for my quality of life as a person in this life, the one that I know counts, the one that I know exists. Like, I want that to count. And that's been a fascinating journey for me. So just be careful with that. Be aware of your triggers. Be aware of those hooks that still might be in you that you don't realize that you're dangling. Just be aware of that, anybody that's listening.